You're tuning in to Financial Fitness Northwest, live on 1150 KKNW. We provide our listeners with information from business professionals to bring solutions to your daily life and local charities to provide you with opportunities to give back to your community as well. And today we have in studio Melissa Gehrig. Did I say it right? I don't know. I have a last name. She's the executive director of Vision House. Melissa has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of California, a Master of Arts degree in organizational leadership from Gonzaga University with an emphasis in servant leadership and strategic planning, and is certified as a senior professional in human resources. She has over 20 years of experience in program management and leadership development. Melissa's work with Vision House as a human resources manager over the past decade has included all facets of leadership and strategic planning. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're so excited to hear about Vision House and what you guys are doing there. Can you tell us a little bit about how it got started and how long you guys have been around?
Yes, absolutely. So Vision House began 27 years ago, founded by a couple, John and Susan Kemmer.
Okay.
And just a really interesting story. They were a young couple with a baby, and they were watching a made-for-TV movie called God Bless the Child. And it was a story about a single mom who, through a series of events, lost her job, lost her housing, and spoiler alert here, but at the end of the movie, she ended up having to give up her child to the state. And you see her, putting her child in a swing in a park and then walking away as a social worker comes up to take over the child.
Oh, man.
And so John and Susan felt that if we wake up tomorrow morning feeling as passionately about this issue as we do right now with our baby right here sleeping next to us, we're going to do something about this. And they did. And they put all the money they had, I think it was like $800 in savings, into working towards finding some way to address this cause or this issue. John had been working in the correction system, and so their first efforts were working with single men who were being released from the prison system, but then they realized that single mothers with children had the greatest need around homelessness, the fastest growing population in homelessness in our area. So they then built a home for two families, and it continued to grow. They got church support, but they really started out of their garage and that grassroots effort to where I've been with Vision House for 14 years, almost 14 years. And when I started, we had about 10 employees, and now we have almost 60. Wow. And we own complexes in Renton and Shoreline and a shared house in Burien as well. So, as the issue has grown, so has our organization.
Wow, that's amazing.
Incredible.
I know. That's just takes one person with a
That's right,
heart for something,
exactly.
right, to make a big difference. That's awesome. So tell us about the services that you guys provide.
Right. So since 1990, when we started, we've been able to serve over 1,000 individuals and save them from homelessness. But we traditionally have been a transitional housing program where we own our own buildings, and so we have apartments. We have a complex that has shared units where two families share a unit, and then we have single-family apartments. And what happens is a family comes into our program, and for whatever reason they became homeless, whether it's domestic violence, loss of a job, or maybe their generational homelessness is their issue. And so we assess what those issues are and what barriers they have to being able to move to permanent housing and maintain that housing. And so we work with each family individually and provide whatever services that they need, whether it's referring them to mental health counseling or financial literacy, that financial fitness piece, or helping them to find a job, resume writing, whatever it happens to be. But what we've also been realizing is that the population of homelessness has been growing. The issue is in the forefront today in a way that it never has been. 2 years ago, homelessness in our area increased by 19%, whereas nationally it had actually decreased.
Wow.
And then this past year, it grew another 9%. So it's continuing to spiral out, and families in turn are continuing to spiral out. So we we started looking at this issue and said, okay, we have housing right now for 36 families, but we want to serve more. We know we can do more. How do we do that? So we spent the past 2 years analyzing our program, analyzing our services to really hone in on what specific issues are they dealing with that we know will help them to, if we work with them around these issues, will help them to move and maintain permanent housing, move to and maintain permanent housing. So we narrowed down from 16 efforts that families were working on, everything from parenting to health and wellness, to those areas that truly will help them end their homelessness. Because what we found was that they were staying too long in our program.
Okay.
And that what we also realized is that we can do more than beyond just housing them. So we have redesigned our program to expand to being able to prevent families from becoming homeless by offering homelessness prevention through eviction prevention, financial assistance, and then that case management support that will help them to understand what the issue was that got them into this eviction situation in the first place. And a lot of times what that is conflict resolution with their landlord, their communication issues. So we're working with both the tenant and the landlord. So we're providing eviction prevention. Right now, the federally preferred model for the solution to end homelessness is what's called rapid rehousing. And that's the belief is that if you put a family in a home first and then provide services, that will end the trauma and of homelessness and move them on their way to being able to stay permanently housed. What we have found is that they need time to stabilize from their trauma. Because so many families, we know homelessness in itself is a trauma-inducing experience, but so is domestic violence. So is living in your car for 15 years. And again, we're talking about families with children. That's the population we serve.
Wow.
You see single individuals out there on the streets or living in cars, but there are families with children who are experiencing those same things.
So how do you find, do people come to you or do you have some outreach, especially on the prevention side?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's
Both actually. So interestingly enough, most cities in the nation, as well as the city of Seattle, King County, has what's called a coordinated entry system where everybody that's homeless goes to one central point and then they're assessed and referred to a program that would fit their demographic or their issues, their barriers to permanent housing. Vision House is not part of the coordinated entry system, and it's not that we don't appreciate that collaboration. In fact, I've done a lot of work to try to reach out and understand what's happening in the landscape in our county so that we can learn from each other and be resources for each other. But we are a faith-based organization, which means that we don't accept any public funding. And so we don't have to be part of that system. So it's that string that is attached to receiving city or county dollars that you have to be part of the system. But because we don't have to be part of the system. So we get referrals from their system because they know we exist and they know the work that we do. But we also get referrals from individuals, from churches, from other social service agencies. We get people that come to us from they'll stay in a shelter like Mary's Place or Union Gospel Mission, and they'll stay in these other programs until we have an opening, and then they'll come to us because we're a longer term stay.
How long can they stay there at Vision House?
Average stay is 6 to 18 months.
Okay, wow.
For we have a tiered model: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 2 and Tier 3 is our transitional housing program. Tier 2 being 6 to 18 months, where we can work with families on multiple issues at a time. But then we have families that have higher barriers to being able to sustain permanent housing. And so we work with them on one issue at a time, and sometimes they're with us for up to 3 years.
Wow.
In Tier 1, that's that eviction prevention as well as a rapid rehousing component because we do use that when we can. But what we also changed in our program in the past 2 years is to really, at the very outset, instead of having them fill out an application and put them on a waiting list, and then they wait for, 6 months, 12 months, sometimes 2 years before we have an opening. We do what's called diversion, and that's a very common intervention in this landscape of homelessness prevention, or the solution to ending homelessness. But we do this with every single applicant. And what that looks like is that diversion technically means diverting someone from the shelter system by providing them with alternative housing solutions, or helping them to identify alternative housing solutions, so that they don't end up in a shelter or in a program like ours. And so, but what we do is every single applicant that calls in, we return their phone call within 72 hours instead of making them wait on a list.
Oh, wow.
And then within 2 weeks, we are sitting down with them and having a diversion conversation where we're saying, what are your issues? What is your history? Are you a good fit for our program in the first place? And if they're not, then we provide them resources to other programs, or, again, identifying alternative housing solutions. A couple of examples of what that looks like is we had a family recently who we were able to identify with them that they had not only a job opportunity, but a family member who was willing to house them in Texas, but they couldn't get there. They couldn't financially move their family there. So we gave them bus tickets to move to Texas. So they were able to go there. We know they're stably housed now. And so that kept them from becoming homeless.
That's great.
Yeah.
One other brief story is same type of situation where we were able to identify a family member in Bremerton. So they were able to go to Bremerton. Or another family who had a friend who needed a medical care provider. And so that was a housing solution, as long as they provided that extra, that work.
care.
And then they are able to also go back to school and work towards their goals.
Wow. That's really fantastic. Can you share a little bit about why homelessness is growing so rapidly in this area?
Well, that's a great question, and it's the one that everybody asks. And my belief, my assessment is that it's our affordable housing issue. For every $100 increase in rent prices, 15% more of the population become homeless. So people are being priced out of rental properties. That, along with people moving here believing that they can get a job, and they don't end up with any viable work opportunities. I had a gentleman call me. I don't usually answer the phone, but this one day I answered the phone, and this guy, he came from Boston, and he came with his whole family. And he believed that he could get a job here because he was a skilled professional, and couldn't get a job. And he and his family had been living in their car for over a month. He had a couple of kids, he and his wife, and they had nowhere to go. So those are the stories that we hear with families in particular.
Wow. That is a crazy statistic.
It is. It's mind-boggling.
I mean, I don't even know to get your head around that. Like, that is just...
Well, if you think about how much rent is increasing at such a rapid pace, right?
Right.
And then the minimum wage is like $15 an hour. You can't even afford to live.
No, it's you have to make this research shows that you have to make over $23 an hour to be able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment.
Where is that? Is that a geographic?
In King County.
In King County. Okay.
And $33 an hour is considered a livable wage for a family of 4.
Wow.
So that's, how many service, I saw this crazy graphic recently where it showed the bubbles of how much people make along the lines of their field of their market in their employment. And the largest bubble was below the poverty line, and that was service workers. So people can go and get a minimum wage job, but it still puts them below the poverty line. And being able to afford anything in the city of Seattle is out of the question.
I know. And then that gets hard too, because, if, you go further out and the housing becomes a little bit more affordable, but then they have transportation and fuel and all the other expenses along with commuting a really long distance. And that.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody this past weekend she's a school teacher in Everett. And, we have this wonderful law. It's the McKinney-Vento law, which allows certain rights for homeless children in the school systems. But one of the things that it allows is for a child to stay in their home school. So if they move to another city, they can be transported, and that transportation is paid for by the state so that they can stay in their school. I mean, because, homelessness for children is so disruptive and trauma-inducing anyway that's the belief is that if they can at least stay in their school.
Have that stability.
That's one piece of stability. Yeah. But this teacher said that, she had a child I think she said she teaches third grade, but this child was commuting from Kent to Everett, and she had to leave at like 6 or 6:30 every morning, and she would fall asleep on the way back from school. And what happens to children in those situations is that they fall behind. Mm-hmm. They don't get enough sleep, they don't get enough food, they don't have a place to even do their homework. Even families that are staying that are called doubled up, where they're living with friends or other family members, maybe in a spare room or on the floor, they don't have a place to go and do their homework. And there may be so much chaos in the home environment there that they aren't able to focus. So homeless children often fall behind in a grade level in school.
Wow. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
So how can people get involved and help since you guys aren't publicly funded?
Right. Well, we financially, obviously, we rely on individual, business, church, and private foundations to fund us. We do a lot of fundraising. We have one of our 2 main fundraising events coming up on October 24th. It's a breakfast at the Linwood Convention Center, and our guest speaker is Doug Baldwin of the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh,
so if you're interested in that event, our website is visionhouse.org, and there's information there about that event. We also use a lot of volunteers. So one of the things that we do, the services that we provide for our families to overcome their issues, to address their barriers to housing, is our classes. Financial literacy classes, housing sustainability classes. We have a parenting class, and those classes are taught by volunteers, and we train them. So volunteers can come and do that work. We have tutors, volunteers that come with homework, do homework help, volunteers that just provide maintenance support for us. It saves us a lot of money each year without having to hire those services out. So we have a lot of volunteer opportunities that people can get involved.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing that information with us. We'll have everything on the website. To find out about any topics discussed on today's show, you can find us online at www.financialfitnessandw.com.